You're live.
And we're live.
I'm the Newton.
And we're live. And we're at the Parliament of the World's Religions. And our workshop is In Defense of Human Rights for All Humans. I want to mention we're recording this. Is that okay with everybody that's here? Okay, so your voice may end up on the recording if you ask a question. My name is Don Bino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. Our main offices are here in Wonder Lake, Illinois. I started coming to the Parliament of the World's Religions in 1993, not 1893. I wasn't at that one, but I was at the one in 1993, which is where I hooked up with this character here. We met in 1993 as well. And there are a lot of things that are of interest to us here. We like talking with people. I like understanding what it is that they believe and why they believe it. That's helpful. I am a little concerned, I have to say, over the years as sort of progressed to say, if you don't believe what we believe, you're not really part of a club. And I'm not really sure how that's going to work itself out in the end. But in the meantime, it's interesting to us. So when I saw this one, I've never presented a workshop at Parliament before, so this is my first time here. But when I saw the theme, a call to conscience, come on now. Why is it not working, I wonder?
Call to conscience, defending freedom and human rights.
I understand that, but I have like a whole thing here that's supposed to come over, and why is it not working? All right, I'm going to turn this off and turn it back on. Let's see what happens. Okay. Isn't it fun when this stuff doesn't actually work like it's supposed to work? Okay. Well, I don't know what to do about that now. All right, a call to conscience. We'll just go this way. In defense of human rights for all humans, a call to conscience, defending freedom and human rights. And I thought about the theme, something occurred to me because I've heard a lot about human rights over the years, as probably many of you have, is there seems to be a lack of definition. What constitutes being human? For example, we have had the Hutus and Tutsis some time back had a terrible battle. Why? Well, one group was humans and they regarded the other group as non-humans. What's the criteria for being human? So it seems to me that we have to have a definition. And I thought about this as I thought about the young lady who I eventually married. We were dating for a few months, and one day she asked me if I would go shopping. And I thought about it, and I said, okay, shopping. We're going to get in the car, we're going to drive to the mall. It's about a 7-minute drive. We're going to go to this particular store. We'll walk in a certain door. She's going to buy a blouse, probably. It'll be whatever color it is, likely. And then we'll pay for it. We'll get back in the car. We'll drive back home. This is going to be, I don't know, 24 minutes. We'll be done. What I didn't realize is she had a whole different definition, which was we're going to go shopping. We're going to get in the car, we're going to drive to the mall, we're going to walk around the mall, we're going to have a Coke, we're going to visit for a while, we're going to hold hands. What she was after was a relationship. I was after completing a task. We had very different definitions of shopping, so we weren't really communicating. And I think for what we're doing here, that is a problem. If we're not really communicating, we're not accomplishing anything. It's interesting, as I've done some research, I read a really interesting book by an atheist named Tom Holland called Dominion. And it turns out that one of the very first times that we have on record of the phrase human rights being used was in 1550 in a debate held in the Spanish city of Valladolid. I probably pronounced it wrong, on whether or not the Indians, and that would be the Indians in South America, were entitled to self-government. The aged Bartolome das Casas had more than held his zone. Who were the true barbarians, he had demanded, the Indians or a gentle, patient, and humble or the Spanish conquerors, whose lust for gold and silver was no less ravening than their cruelty. Pagan or not, every human being had been made equally by God and endowed by him in the same spark of reason, is how he argued. To argue as he did, his opponents had done, the Indians were as inferior to the Spaniards as monkeys were to men, was a blasphemy, plain and simple. All the peoples of the world are humans, and there is only one definition for all humans, and of each one, that is that they are rational. And that is every mortal, Christian or not, had right to that derived from God. So he argued from the translation. I probably need you to tell me what this, Rachos Hermanos, Las Casas had termed them human rights. They were human rights, he argued, that the South American Indians were human based on being human. That was it, they had human rights. That seems to me the proper understanding of what is a human. It is a biological statement of being what you are. We find something interesting, though, in the 1925 Scopes trial. How many of you have heard of the Scopes trial? It's an interesting trial. The question was, can we teach evolution in schools or not? Now, I'm not here to argue on whether we should teach it or not. I'm here to point out something important about the textbook that was being used in 1925, which in fact had been written in 1914. And in it, it tells us the races of man. This is a scientific statement on humans. At present time, there exist upon the earth 5 races or varieties of man, each very different from the other in instincts, social customs, and to an extent in structure. These are the Ethiopian or Negro type, originated in Africa, the Malay or brown race from the islands of the Pacific, the American Indian, the Mongolian or yellow race, including the natives of China, Japan, and the Eskimos, and finally, catch this, the highest race type of all, the Caucasians, represented by civilized white inhabitants of Europe and America. This is not Christians, this is the scientists of the day making this claim that the Africans are the lowest on the evolutionary plan. In fact, their view was that their intelligence was closer to that of apes than they were of white Caucasians. Clearly racist, clearly not viewing blacks as equal humanity to whites. So how is it that they can redefine humanity in that way? I would suggest it is the problem of the other. And I'm going to turn to Bill Hunsberger and ask him to come in. And Bill, you have to learn what I just keep trying to relearn. Put it under the knee. The chin. I don't care.
Okay, so I teach philosophy and ethics at several colleges in the, I teach philosophy and ethics at several colleges in the Denver area, as well as being the director of Haven Ministries. And part of my interest in teaching this is that I had several professors who had in fact advanced the cause in the name of atheism, that to be it's still? All right, I'm sorry. I had several professors in my ethics class at CU Boulder and then later at the University of Denver. I was trying to finish my doctorate. They advocated the view that it was okay not only to commit abortion, but in fact infanticide was also on the exact same grounds, on the same problem of the definition of the person. So one of my teachers, I'm going to show you his paper here, was Dr. Michael Tooley. In his day in analytic philosophy, a very famous philosopher. He wrote a paper called In Defense of Abortion and Infanticide. I've got it right here. When it was in my class, the paper was called What is a Person? Very much on this question. And the issue of, for him, the way he argues his paper, and I make my students work on this paper every year, the issue for him is the idea of being human is not the same thing as being a person. Now, if you'd asked philosophers a couple hundred years ago, even Dr. Tully's utilitarian, but if you'd ask, I would say, Mill or Bentham, the great utilitarians, you'd ask Immanuel Kant, definitely not a utilitarian, deontological theorist. If you'd ask them what a human being was and a person was, they would say it's the exact same thing. If you'd ask an atheist like David Hume what a person was, he would have said the exact same thing, because that's pretty much the standard definition throughout history. But Dr. Tully makes the point in his paper, as many have followed this now. He wrote this in 1972, which some of you are old enough to remember, is the year before Roe v. Wade. And when Roe v. Wade came out, one of the things that was being predicted by the pro-life side was that if you allow for abortion on demand, you're opening the door to infanticide. And all the pro-choice people said, oh no, there's no connection at all. And Dr. Tully wrote this paper in 1972, making a direct connection between abortion and infanticide. In fact, he argues in his paper that you can kill a child up to the age of 2 because of mental, or physical handicaps, because it's a burden on the family, or because it's Tuesday. The exact same things you could do for abortion, you could do for infanticide. Dr. Tully's friend, Peter Singer, who's a very famous professor, some of you have heard of Dr. Singer, bioethics chair at Princeton, is also on President Obama's health panel. Dr. Singer makes the case that the age of 2 is way too restricted. You should be able to kill the child up to the age of 5. This is professors arguing this case because a person is not the same thing as a human being. So a person is now what I call a legal fiction in terms of these things. It has to be constructed by somebody else, what makes somebody a person, because clearly being a human being for a lot of these professors is not the same thing anymore. So part of my reaction to this kind of paper, I had Dr. Coombs' paper. I was here in '93, like Don was in the first parliament. I sat in Dr. Coombs' session when he presented the global ethic in the first place. And there's some interesting quotes in here. Each of us depends on the well-being of the whole, and so we have respect for the community of living beings, for people, animals, plants, for the preservation of earth, water, and air. You can read this, you can find it online in a heartbeat. You can read the rest of it. There's quite a few quotes where he talks about the fact that living beings, not just older human beings or something like this, is irrelevant to age, to race, to sex, to geography, to economic status, or anything like that. It's relevant to the fact of whether they're alive or not. One of the things science teaches us without at all is that the baby is alive before its birth and it's alive after its birth. And Dr. Tully makes a choice in his paper, or presents his readers with a choice. If you understand that, he agrees with that. He doesn't question it at all, that it's a living being before, as most abortion rights activists are basically come around to today, that yes, that is a living being, yes, by species it is a human being, blah, 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 and it doesn't matter. Dr. Tully's argument was not to try to convince pro-life people that pro-choice is the way to go. He's trying to convince pro-choice people that for the exact same reasons, the option of infanticide should be open to us as a civilized people. I always call Dr. Tully the nicest evil man I've ever met. He says the reason why they're not persons yet, and why it's okay to kill them, is because they're not conscious yet. Now, if you know anything about philosophy, and probably most of you are blessed to not know anything, and that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. But one of the most controversial issues in philosophy is the area of consciousness. What does it mean to be conscious? Where does that come from? How does that come from molten rock, from the prebiotic soup, all these different types of arguments. You can read probably the best known philosopher in the country now, Thomas Nagel. That's a huge issue for him. And one of the reasons he abandoned Darwin 11 years ago in his famous book is because Darwin doesn't explain consciousness. Well, yeah, it's a tough one for all people to wrestle with this. All right, so Tully takes one of the most controversial arguments there is and says on the basis of consciousness, now he defines it very narrowly. What does he mean? Am I aware of myself and am I aware of others? Wow. So he says, you're not aware of yourself up until the age of 2 and aware of others. So being the obnoxious person that I naturally am, I asked him, whoa. I said, what about Aunt Edna? She gets hit in a car accident, she's in a coma, she's no longer conscious of herself and others. Can we kill her? Especially if she's got money. It's in our interest to do such a thing. If I go utilitarian like Dr. Tully, it'll create a lot of happiness for a lot more people. You can say this any way you want. I asked him after class, I was really upset about this. I have an autistic son. And by definition, my son would be eligible for being killed because He didn't even talk till the age of 11. He wouldn't even look at you. You could argue very, very easily that he wasn't aware of himself and others. And of course, we've been around autistic people all our life, having been thrown into this world. Well, so I went into the office and I asked him, Dr. Tooley, I'm really interested about this. How is it you picked the age of 2? It seems extremely arbitrary. It seems like you just picked it out. And Dr. Singer points out, you could have said 5. You could have said all sorts of ages. In my college classes, I said, you know, if they'd argued you could go teenagers, maybe I'd go with it, but I've had 8 teenagers, I understand this. Anyways, I said, Dr. Tooley, what if we just arbitrarily choose another category for why it's okay to kill somebody? How about blondes? Or maybe, how about left-handed people? I said, how about the Jews? Oh yeah, we've already tried this, haven't we? And I try to tell my classes, be very careful when one group of people gets to decide the humanity, especially when it comes to the issue of whether you can kill them or not, of another group of human beings. And I think part of the focus we want to make here is for defending the rights of all human beings, is that human beings are not separated by 3 inches of geography. That's Dr. Tooley's statement. He's agreeing that that human being is in the womb. And then he assigns something that, oh, maybe Congress should decide, or some group of judges, or some other group of lawyers, or somebody else should decide whether they're persons or not. And I reject that dramatically. So, and I think the point of Dr. Kung's thing is that we here at the Parliament should reject it as well. The defense for human rights extends to all. We don't get to decide. So when I listened to Dr. Singer just a year ago make the argument that there was a family that had a Down syndrome baby in England, and people were trying to push that the baby should be killed, the baby shouldn't be aborted. Dr. Singer said, yes, kill that child. It's a moral thing to do. It will create too much unhappiness by letting the child be born. So the parent should kill the child and start over and try again. Now, how many different ways have we rationalized over the course of history, whether it's religion or philosophy, how many times have we rationalized the idea that it's okay to kill somebody else? There's a billion ways we rationalize these things. And my argument, or John's argument this morning, is that there's never a good rationale for why you kill other human beings. It does not exist, it should not exist, and we here at the Parliament should stand up for all living beings. Thank you.
Yeah, Bill usually has a hard time telling time. So, what is the criteria then to qualify as being human? We should have some criteria that we can measure that against, so that we can say, this is what we're defending. Are we arguing as a matter of conscience that we should defend freedom and human rights? If so, shouldn't we know what a human is? What will that criteria for that be? I have a friend, Scott Klusendorf, who lays out an acronym which I tend to like on what being a human is. And the question is it size, level of development, environment, or degree of dependency? Some of these things Bill has touched on. I'm going to touch on them again because I think they're important. Is it size? Is that the question? Embryos arguably are smaller than newborns and adults. But why is that relevant? Do we really want to say that large humans are more human than small ones? I am larger than Christina, our friend. Does that make me more human than Christina? Well, that's absurd. She's kinder than I am. So maybe that's the criteria. Men are generally larger than women. So are men deserve more human rights than women do? Some might argue that. I would suggest that is not a good criteria. Size does not equal value. Human life is valuable for all humans, regardless of size. Is it a matter of level of development? Embryos and fetuses are less developed than humans, than adults, that they'll one day become. But again, why is that relevant? 4-year-old girls are less developed than 14-year-old ones. Should older children have more rights than their younger siblings? Some people say that self-awareness makes one human. But if that's true, newborns do not qualify as valuable human beings. They have no self-awareness. What about, as Bill pointed out, someone in a coma? Are they no longer human while they're in a coma? How about this? When you're asleep, are you still human? So how far do we go with this self-awareness argument for determining humanity? I think that's a problem. Self-awareness is not a criteria. 6-week-old infants lack the immediate capacity for performing human mental functions, as do the reversibly comatose, the sleeping, and those with Alzheimer's. Do you become non-human when you have Alzheimer's disease? This is serious in arguing for what is a human, which kinds of humans deserve human rights. Is it environment? Embryos and fetuses are less developed than adults and, what's the wrong one here? Is it environment? Where you are has no bearings on who you are. Is it a matter of geography? If I live in a certain location, does that make me more human than somebody who doesn't live in that location? In other words, if I live, I don't know, in Wonder Lake, Illinois, does that make me more human than someone who lives in the south side of Chicago, just based on geography? Okay, what about if I live inside the womb, does that make me less human than someone who lives outside of the womb? It's just a geographical question, really. Does your value change when you cross the street or roll over in bed? If not, how can a journey of 8 inches down the birth canal suddenly change the essential nature of a unborn from non-human to human? If the unborn are not already human, merely changing the location can't make them valuable. I was going to bring a little video, I didn't bring it, but it's a young woman, and she does this thing about the magical birth canal, and she takes a large piece of sheet metal, basically, and she moves the child from one side to the other side and says, not human, not human, not human, not the other end, human. How is it? It's a magical birth canal. You become human once you go through the birth canal, but you're not human until that point in time. It's a matter of environment or a matter of geography. Degree of dependency. If viability makes us human, then all who depend on insulin or kidney medication are not valuable, and we may therefore kill them. Conjoined twins who share blood type and bodily systems also have no right to life. You see how hard this is, how difficult this is? Once we start changing the definition of human, then anything goes. We can eliminate what one group not many years ago called useless eaters. Do we go from every child a wanted child to every grandma a wanted grandma? What does that look like? Or every human a wanted human? Does them being wanted make them more or less human, or some reason to defend their rights to life than others? It's an important thing. Is human life sacred? The Hindu scriptures, I like this, from Hinduism Today, they say, Hindu scripture and tradition clearly prohibit abortion, except to save the life of the mother. It is considered an act against Rita, universal order, and ahimsa, non-injury. In the words of Swami, how do you say that, Bill? Okay, that's Swami. Imagine through millions of abortions around the world, day in and day out, how many wonderful scientific and spiritual geniuses, doctors, men of excellence of every kind, sages, saints, benefactors of mankind, builders of a better culture and civilization are destroyed even before they can take a breath of fresh air on the earth. Hindu ethics do not justify aborting a fetus because of actual or potential deformity or mental retardation. For each birth, normal or not, is revered as having a divine purpose to be understood, not manipulated. We have heard in this conference many times people talking about being in the image of God, Imago Dei. Does that include all humans or only those who manage to survive the birth canal? That's the question. What about Buddhism? Ahimsa, the Shambhala dictionary of Buddhism and Zen, says In Buddhism, non-harming of life beings, ahimsa, is considered one of the most important aspects of the Buddhist spiritual attitude. Is the baby in the womb a human life? The principle is also included in the concept of right resolve, the second of the Eightfold Path. Forcing spiritual Buddhist healthcare workers to participate in abortion of any stage would cause them to violate the fifth value of the Eightfold Path, that of right livelihood, which is about of avoiding professions counter to ahimsa, i.e., that are harmful to living beings, which would include for them working in slaughterhouses, weapons factories, selling drugs, or participating in abortions. Is human life sacred in Islam? The Council of Senior Scholars issued the following statements. 1, it is not permissible to abort a pregnancy at any stage unless there is a legitimate reason and within very precise limits. They have very precise limits, which would allow for abortion. Very strict. 2, if pregnancy is in the first stage, which is a period of 40 days, and aborting it serves a legitimate purpose or will ward off harm, then it is permissible to abort it. But aborting it at this stage for fear of the difficulty of raising children, or of being able to bear the cost of maintaining and educating them, or for fear of their future, or because people feel that they have enough children, this is not permissible. The Council of Senior Elders issued this following statement as well. It is not permissible to abort a pregnancy when it is a clot or chewed lump of flesh, which are the second to third periods of 40 days each, until the trustworthy medical committee has decided that continuing the pregnancy poses a threat to the mother's well-being, in that there is a fear that she will die if the pregnancy continues. It is permissible to abort it once all means of warding off that danger have been exhausted. So if she's in physical danger and it cannot be averted, then basically what you're doing is choosing to save one life rather than lose two. That sounds reasonable to me. We can't save everyone. Sometimes you have to make a choice. I think that's true. But you choose wisely because you don't want to abort the child because it might be inconvenient. Rather, there's one really justification. If you have to choose between the mother or the child, they're saying choose to save the life of the mother. So save one, don't lose two. 4, after the third stage and after 4 months have passed, it is not permissible to abort the pregnancy unless a group of trustworthy medical specialists decide that keeping the fetus in his mother's womb will cause her death. And that should only be done after all means of keeping the fetus alive have been exhausted. A concession is made allowing abortion in this case so as to ward off the greater of two evils and to serve the greater of two interests. The United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, December 10, 1948, said this, Article 2, everyone is entitled to all rights and freedoms set forth in the Declaration, without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political, or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. So any status of humanity should have human rights. That was in 1948. So here's our question. Should every human have human rights? What about a 20-week-old still in the womb? Should that child have human rights? Do we have anything you want to add to this?
Yeah.
So I was making the connection that my professors were making on the connection between abortion and infanticide. Some people have argued that, we are ignoring the plight of women. And I would argue exactly the opposite. If you go to the website, it's a girl.com, and the website, the subtitle for it is the 3 most dangerous words in any language are, it's a girl. And they discuss the issue of gendercide. And the issue of gendercide, and they bring up in particular what's gone on in India and China for the last going on 60 plus years now. And the estimate is they've at over 200 million girls who have been killed through abortion and through infanticide. So if somebody wants to say that somehow we're speaking out against women, I would say it's exactly the opposite. Most abortions in countries where they allow sex selection are the girls. Most cultures that ever practice infanticide throughout the history of the human race have been girls, whether it's the Romans, the Greeks, the Aleuti, Eskimos, you name it. And now we have present-day India and China killing all these girls. And when you watch the video of It's a Girl, the trailer for it shows a woman, I would guess her to be in her maybe mid-40s or so, maybe a little older, and she is giggling as she's walking the camera crew back to where she's just buried her 8th daughter. Because in India, because of the dowry system and the way it's all set up, it is so expensive to have a girl. It costs you so much. And the Widow Islands and all this other terrible stuff that happens with this. But the reality is that I think when you look at what happens with abortion and infanticide around this world, it is the girls who are paying the majority price. And therefore, I think in the name of protecting women, I have 10 granddaughters, I tend to care about them. In the name of protecting women, that's another, to me, a solid argument for why we should not allow for abortion and infanticide and defend the human rights of all living beings.
Okay, now, questions, comments, arguments why we're completely wrong. Yes, ma'am. I want them to hear your very own voice. Careful.
So I just want to thank you very much for doing this. We have a table, we're the Consistent Life Network. We have a table upstairs. We are anti-violence, pro-life, from conception to natural death. I am as progressive socially as you can get on the left. I think everyone should have healthcare for free, housing for free, education for free. Most of us do. But we are very pro-life. We do understand there's a spectrum. Incest, rape, we understand people supporting those exceptions. I know there are various opinions on that. But I am so glad you're presenting this at this conference. And as you can first understand, I live in Oregon. Oregon is one of the few states where it's accepted to have an abortion up until birth. So Oregon and a few other states, up until birth, you can kill the child. And that's okay. Oregon is an extremely pro-choice state. I was involved in many progressive groups in Oregon, including our Democratic Party. Some have been also involved in progressive pro-life groups and splashed all over Facebook. I got phone calls, emails, and threats, everything you can imagine. I got thrown in every single group I belonged to in Oregon. I looked pretty close to it. But it's hard to stand up and say you're pro-life in so many parts of the country. So I am so glad that you guys are here. And please come visit our table upstairs.
Good. Thank you. Yeah. What is your booth number?
322.
Booth 322 upstairs. Okay. Anybody else? Comments? Objections? We're good with objections.
You want to throw rocks, tomatoes?
Want to throw rocks? Yeah, keep the tomatoes. He's not a vegetarian. All right. No questions. I think we're pretty much done for today. Thank you so much.